Hey, kids, and welcome. It is time once again for Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. Conscious embodiment coming at you for January 30th through February 5th. And it's like life is moving. The planets are moving once again after quite a lot of delay as we crossed the threshold into the new year, and we start February, which is sort of like the first month of like movement with Mercury and Mars and their retrograde sort of behind us. So let's actually start today just talking about that idea of like forward movement and energy moving in a way, the retrogrades behind us. And I'll start with this idea that we're well into this period where, if you look on social media, you would think that the biggest astrological news is all the planets are direct for a couple of months. So if you've tuned into me as an astrologer, you know that I have some challenges with the way the general astrological community portrays retrogrades and moments like this with all the planets direct. So here's my take on this. It is so that every once in a while, all of the planets will be direct as they are now. This is not rare, but it's also not regularly occurring in a way that you can, like clockwork, like expect it. My intuitive sense of my memory, and I've not like looked at this, like I'm not that big of a nerd. Like 25 years ago, I would have been enough of an astrology nerd to spend a few hours looking at these rhythms. But I'm guessing that every 18 months or so, maybe a little more, we go through periods where all the planets are direct.
And then our life is feeling forward moving with lots of change, right?
Well, that's what the memes will tell you. And here's where I object to that. Part of it is that some of the memes would suggest a kind of magical thinking notion. At least that's the way my mind interprets the language I read, which sort of implies that because all of the planets are direct, you will be unstoppable. Everything will move forward. Every plan you ever had back in the months when retrogrades were present will give way and you will sail forward into your future unimpeded. And that's just bullshit. Like, that's magical thinking. So is there a difference between a moment when all of the planets are direct and moments when some of the planets are retrograde? Well, sure. Except that if you've been following me for any appreciable amount of time, you know that I absolutely dog down it with no energetic change in your little body when the outer planets go retrograde or direct. So if the three outer planets are direct and you say, well, all of the other planets are direct, therefore there's going to be some big forward motion, I'm here to say I don't experience the idea that those outer planets, direct or retrograde, make any difference in your life.
I'm personally experiencing some really fun changes. So is that just what happens to be happening?
Well, but here's the thing about this particular one, Zoe, is that we just coming out of a period where two personal planets were retrograde, including the personal planet Mars, that is literally reflecting our movement and things that happen in the physical world. So he wasn't moving for all of November, all of December, and half of January, so neither were we. And then in the January period, late December into January, the mind was backwards with Mercury's retrograde. So it stands to reason, with those two personal planets going direct in January, that we are going to start and did start to feel movement that we weren't feeling. So then someone puts out a meme that says all the planets are direct and you're going to feel that at a moment when this particular swath of all direct motion includes coming out of a Mars-Mercury double retrograde. And the forward movement you're describing that I'm feeling as well is because of Mars, not because of all planets moving in direct motion at this time. Now listen, kids. I can be wrong about this. I'm not saying this as like I'm the authority and I'm right. This is my experience of being an astrologer for 25, almost 30 years and using my own energetic sensations compared with what astrology dictates. And so I have got 25, 30 years of data in my body of how I describe certain things. And that's where I come from, this perspective. Sometimes when I fight against it like this, though, I feel so foolish. It's like, Michael, you're just honoring the fact that you're a little contrary and want to seem authoritatively right. So you've grabbed this thing and are saying, I'm right and you all are wrong. It's like, At any rate, things are moving forward this month, and that actually is something worthy of talking about, not just my opinions about astrology. So let's talk about that just a little bit with regard to Mars and his pace. So right now, as of today, January 30th, Mars is at 10 degrees of Gemini. He stationed at 8 degrees, where he stayed for like 4 weeks. Because as a planet moves backward or forward, it appears to slow down, right? So Mars's typical pace, way outside of a retrograde, is 0.5 degree a day. So now compare 0.5 degree a day of motion trajectory, and then imagine what that must have felt like to have Mars at a single degree for 4 weeks, right? That's a crazy drag on the system that slowed everything down. And then when he went direct last month, he wasn't moving faster just because he turned around. He was moving just as slow. So at this moment, January 30th, the pace of Mars's movement is about 1/4 of a degree a day. That means he's half his regular speed. Now, at the end of the entire month of February, he will be close to his regular speed, but not even quite, right? So the entire month has more energetic movement than January did. And this week is really the first week where we would say he's fully out of that station. He's not at 8 degrees. He's not even at 9. He arrived at 10 degrees like this morning, right? So we can say that there's movement that you're going to feel, I would say both last week, but more so even this week, because Mars is finally sort of picking up his pace, though he's still a little slow, and therefore so will we be.
I'm definitely looking forward to the acceleration. Michael, this week I got a new bed for free, and I'm picking up a foster dog today, my very first foster dog.
I love that.
All big new things.
Well, there you
for
go.
Me,
Movement.
So I can only imagine as it picks up, what does that mean,
Beautiful. Beautiful. No, I have had challenges with Mars's retrograde and my physical energy, my literal physical energy. Mars has been in my 6th house of the body, and I've said this before on the podcast. I really thought during his retrograde I was going to be deepening my fitness when, in fact, I was resting from my fitness, focusing on yoga and hiking, and I'm finally getting back into my body slowly in a new way. But it didn't happen while Mars was moving backwards. At any rate, that's the first little piece of message for the week, kids. Mars is starting to move, not quite as fast as he typically does, but faster than he's been, and we will feel that in terms of just our energetic pace. This is just a tiny little addendum to something energetic that I did not mention last week. At least I don't think I mentioned it. Not that my memory works very well, because it doesn't. But I wasn't on my outline to just talk about Venus changing signs. And I do like to remind people of ingresses when planets change signs, especially the personal planets. We feel that as a shift in sensation. And so Thursday of last week, Venus moved into Pisces. This is a very abrupt and significant change in sensation for the emotional body and love and intimacy, because Venus in Aquarius is a little cold, a little detached. You know, the love language for Venus in Aquarius is, I need my freedom.
Sounds right.
But Venus is exalted in Pisces. And that's not a euphemism, that's an astrological term that means a sign in which a planet's energy is thought to thrive particularly well. Think about it this way. I could give you the technical reasons as to why Venus is exalted in Pisces from like book learning in astrology, but it's much easier to understand when you work with the archetypes. Venus is love. Pisces is the sign through which we are all connected as one. What a great combo. Love in the heart and connected to everybody through compassion, forgiveness, and unity. So Venus is exalted in this sign because she can love on everything and everyone unimpeded. And so the emotional body is more aligned with forgiveness, compassion, and empathy. And we have a kind of dreamier approach to love and intimacy. There's an ease of connection with Venus and Pisces, as it's like Venus in Aquarius would be like, yeah, I don't think I want to connect today. Where Venus in Pisces is connected before one can even ascertain whether one wants to be connected. So, in fact, maybe a warning for all of you who struggle a little bit with over empathy or taking on the feelings of others. This is a 3.5-week period where that might rise up a little bit more, but that love, forgiveness, compassion is easier to access with Venus in this yummy, lovely water sign. The nodes of the moon, besides connecting with eclipses, also relate to experiences that are happening at the collective level. So what this means for us, using astrology to contextualize our experience, if a planet makes certain contact with the nodes of the moon, it's going to describe a way the energy is unfolding in a bigger picture way on the planet itself, meaning it's impacting everybody at the same time and in the same way. Now, I have not, as an astrologer, typically spent much time considering current events or things that happen out there in the world with politics and using astrology to contextualize. It's not interesting to me because it's not what draws me to astrology. Astrology for me is a tool for my own personal unfolding. But life has changed and things have gotten crazy. And while I'm not an activist out there in the world, I can't separate my experience as a teacher who's trying to help people heal their wounds and rise up to more efficient ways of being in their own embodiment so that the planet can heal a little bit, and the idea that transits to the nodes reflect the kookiness on the planet that we are all experiencing collectively. So there's an interesting hit from Neptune to the north node of the moon that hits this week. And I think if I set up a correlation between the planet and the geometry and then point out certain things about certainly politics in the United States, this will make great sense to people. Okay.
I forget the characteristic of Neptune.
Well, it's a great question. Thank you for setting this up, because Neptune is about our connection to spirituality and the collective at a greater level. But there's an interesting setup where all planets have shadow artifacts when they are triggered in ways that are less than flowing. So we do that with the geometry. In other words, if the geometry is harmonious, easy geometry, Neptune's all about our spiritual connection. But the moment the geometry is edgy or hard, like a square or an opposition, or in this case, a mild conflict of a semi-square, then the shadow of Neptune is what is present. And the shadow of Neptune is always cloudiness, confusion, and an inability to be clear about what's going on. And a semi-square says it's conflictual, but not huge conflict, just minor levels of conflict that generate a sense of, I don't know what's going to happen next because everything's so cloudy and confusing. So this is a transit that will last, its influence will last several months, peaking now, which means the last month or two of the political landscape in the United States is one good way of understanding a moment where the entire collective consciousness of us as humans, certainly in the United States and those who follow what's going on, are confused about what's going to happen next because there's all of this conflict going on. Is it major conflict? No, it's minor conflict, but it's conflict nonetheless between the Republicans and the Democrats. I don't need to spout it all out, but it's like George Santos. Is he Anthony DeWalder or is he George Santos? Is he a congressman or a pathological liar? Is he a this or is he we're confused? Is he a drag queen? Is he a lawmaker? We're confused. The world is confused. Everybody's looking at Congress saying, I don't know what's going to happen next. And so
I don't think they know either.
Well, of course not, because they're all under the influence of Neptune semi-squaring the North Node. We're all confused about what's going to happen next. So there are not a lot of nodal hit during 2023. I talked about them in my forecast for the year. That's still available. If you want to go to michaellenix.com and you can still purchase that recording. But here's the first of 4 of them, and I will talk about them as they rise up all year long. And it's just a moment of appreciating that astrology reflects everything in a way that is crazy enough to inspire me and others to often say, you can't make this shit up. And this is one of them, where if you turn on the news, the biggest thing you might take away is, holy shit, I just can't tell where we're going next. And that's reflecting Neptune semi-squaring the North Node that peaks today. The week itself is fairly easy compared to the last couple of weeks. You can tune in into my daily stuff to figure out the day-to-day. I'm just going to jump to the big news of the week, which is Sunday's full moon in Leo that takes place around 10:30 a.m. Pacific time this Sunday. So we're in the Aquarius mansion, and in Aquarius, we are in consideration of the needs of the community. Aquarius invented service and the idea that the community needs us all to sort of put it first. So, in fact, I might have talked about in the new moon in Aquarius a week plus ago, you might set intentions for powerful, sort of innovative, out of the box, new ways of expressing yourself. But I would have added, but make sure whatever you are focusing on serves the community. Because in Aquarius, if what you are intending and working on doesn't serve the community, it can't really rise up and take form. Leo is the sign that invented, it's all about me. What community? The community serves me in Leo, but Aquarius demands that we serve the community. So one of the things that is always highlighted in a Leo full moon, if the full moon says we got to let something go, and the conscious awareness of the sun says we're serving the community, and Leo is the archetype that invented I count more than you, then part of what has to be released in a Leo full moon is arrogance, ego, myopic self-focus, meaning, I have to be served before I can serve you. Remember, it's the Leo full moon. Leo is opposite Aquarius. Aquarius rules service to the community. If we're going to let something go in the Leo sensibility, it has to be about over focus on self and not the community. So we want to be looking in this full moon for ways in which ego limitations, the need for you to have shiny attention or any way in which your, I hate this term ego because it's just used so often about different things. But for shorthand, I'll just use it now. Anything about your ego that gets in the way of you effectively serving others is part of what you just got to let go of in a Leo full moon. Now, every full moon is also about gratitude. It's not all about release. In fact, it really needs to be a good sort of 50-50, because if you're not celebrating the wins, but only focusing on the limitations or where you got to, do some work, then you're sort of moving through a way of self-deprecating through life, right? We want to look at the wins. So in the gratitude portion of a Leo full moon, you want to celebrate. Where have you found leadership? Where are you personally self-expressing? How is your creative gifts that are inside of you being turned into actions in the outer world that do allow you to self-express? And then right in that consideration, you can flip to the other side and say to yourself, ask, is there anything about me that's inhibiting my ability to serve more profoundly? Let's let that go now. Now, over in the Aries mansion, we've got Chiron and Jupiter inching towards a conjunction. That means that the healing presence that Chiron brings and the expansion capacity of Jupiter they're joining forces. Now, they're actually not going to meet up for a while because they're still actually 6 degrees apart. And while that is close enough to be what we call a conjunction, meaning they vibrate each other, it'll take a while for Jupiter to actually catch up with Chiron. And I assure you when he does, we'll be talking about it here. But they are close enough to be allowing our healing process to be buoyed up by Jupiter's promise of expansion, abundance, and good fortune. And the full moon is trining them. That means the power of release that is built into any full moon, in this particular full moon, has a deep sort of connection to dropping wounds, courtesy of Chiron, in order to facilitate a greater sense of expansion, courtesy of Jupiter. Like, in fact, you could argue that the full moon making contact with Jupiter is great for a moment of really celebrating the wins, all that you've accomplished, all of the abundance, prosperity, good fortune, and manifestation mojo that you've been working with is well reflected by the full moon trining Jupiter. And then on the release side, where we got to let go of sort of ego-driven limits, you've got the trine to Chiron that makes it like a little psychic surgery. Venus and Mars are squaring each other in this full moon. So Venus is all love from her perch in Pisces. So in some ways, we can trust that corner of the square more because our hearts are going to be automatically aligned with the loving, compassionate forgiveness, consciousness of Pisces. That's yummy, right? That means our hearts are dialed right in to our higher sense of love. But Mars is still in Gemini, where there's divide, where there's debate, where there's two sides, where there's decision-making challenges, where I could go either way or another way. So like in the spirit of everything that we've been talking about this full moon and what we have to be willing to let go of in our underbelly experience, conflicts about how our heart feels versus what our bodies might choose to do will be part of what inform us of what this full moon is bringing you. Like if we divide the Gemini-Mars placement into two twins, one twin is Mars in his warring, masculine, fuck you, take no prisoners perspective. or the other that says, well, wait a minute, I've been through 2.5 months of a retrograde. I'm ready to try things new. Remember all the work we've been doing. So that twin is sitting on one shoulder going, hey, make a higher choice. So in that mix, what's available to us is to remember love, forgiveness, compassion, and connection, while then considering what has to be let go of in your ego consciousness that might be inhibiting you. And then Mars and Gemini will be pointing to ways in which our embodiment isn't authentic. Our attachment to anger and being right is greater than our desire for connection. So it's an interesting conflict between body and heart at a full moon, where the heart is so connected to the loving forgiveness potential. And you want to use that friction to illuminate the inner work you're doing to release and let go of things that are too ego-driven and ultimately inhibit your ability to serve the community. And the last thing I'll say is it's a rock'em sock'em full moon, because it T-squares Uranus. The sun is at 16 Aquarius, the moon's at 16 Leo, and Uranus is at 15 Taurus. These are fixed signs. Fixed squares represent conflict energies that are absolutely immovable. From just an energetic perspective, for any of you who are sensitive to full moons, as I am, this is going to be a banging energy just from the way in which full moon energies tend to make us a little crazy. As always, though, when Uranus is present, even when it's difficult geometry like this, and maybe I should just say, fasten your seatbelts and move slow so you don't get knocked off the boat, I want to remind you that Uranus's purpose is to wake us up to higher levels of our awareness. And because he's participating in this full moon, that energy leads the day. That we are, in fact, waking up to a higher level of our conscious awareness, such that the demands, the subtle ways in which we're being asked to go back into our psyche and say, this attitude, this perspective, this way I've been contextualizing my own personal gifts and my own leadership capacity isn't serving. You might get knocked on your ass from the energy, but you'll pick yourself back up the other side of it, better ready or more ready to understand what your gifts are, how they dial into the community's needs, and then move forward serving with greater power, greater joy, and greater excitement. Have at it. So I have to follow up with a question that I sort of promised to answer last week and then didn't. If you recall, Sally asked, what's the part of fortune and what's the vertex? The part of fortune being the circle with the cross. And last week's pod, I described it, and I promised to talk about what the vertex was, and then we just got going with the rest of the pod, and I forgot to answer it. So let us answer Sally's question about what is the vertex, which you might see on a chart as a capital V and a small x. VX stands for the vertex. So to understand the vertex, you first have to understand the rising sign or the eastern horizon based on when you were born. So this is why it's important to know what time you were born when doing an astrology reading, because the latitude and longitude from where you were born and the time of day at which you took your first breath signals a place at the eastern horizon that will be different if the time is different or if you're born in one location or 300 miles away. Probably has to be longer. New York or LA, right? That the latitude and the time count, and it offers this point at the eastern horizon, which we mark as the ascendant, the rising sign. Ascendant and rising sign mean the same thing. The rising sign, if you look at a chart and you know what time you were born, the rising sign is the cusp of what's called the first house. And if the chart were a clock, this would be the 9 o'clock position. And then it moves counterclockwise around. So 9 o'clock would be your first house in your rising sign, and your second house would be 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock. It moves that way. So I'm hoping that this language has everybody picture in their mind that there's this like vector of energy we call the rising sign that sticks out from the eastern horizon of the earth based on when you took your first breath. But that rising sign is going to rise up and then down based on whether you're born in the summer or the winter, because the earth tilts. So as the earth is tilting sort of one way towards the sun in what we would call summer, the rising sign would be sort of ersatz higher, if you will. And that in the winter, when the days are shorter, the rising is pointed below because the rising is following the earth tilting. But the whole solar system is held in a flat ecliptic that is not tilting. So like if you could see that from like, God's eye view from down sort of, you've sort of shrunk below at the level of like, looking at the earth from direct side, you would see that the earth is tilting within this other flat plane that is not tilting. The flat plane I'm talking about is the imaginary disk that the solar system is sitting in. And that trajectory of energy does not rise and fall with the seasons. It stays fixed. So when each of us are born, there's 2 points of energy sticking out there, one of which is the eastern horizon that we call the ascendant or the rising sign, and this other energy of the ecliptic holding a kind of imaginary eastern horizon that's not changed by the tilt of the earth. So when you take your first breath, there's a point at which those two energy vectors intersect, and that's the vertex. So what the vertex then means, or the meaning it takes on, is that if the rising sign is your connection point to others, it's like a relationship point. It's how you relate to the world and the world relates to you. And every relationship within the world that you have is happening through the energy of your rising, of your ascendant. But this point where your rising intersects with the sort of collective rising point, meaning the eastern horizon of the whole earth, not impacted by the tilt, now you have like a second rising sign for that chart. And it's the rising or the relational point of fated connections. And so if you cast a chart, many of the programs that give you free charts will show you this VX. Mm-hmm. And it means a point where your eastern horizon and the Earth's imaginary fixed eastern horizon are crossing. So it acts just like the rising sign in your chart, meaning it's how you relate to the world and the world relates to you, playing out as relationships. But now it's about those relationships that are fated to occur. So if I look at two people's charts for what's called synastry, synastry, synastry is the art of looking at two charts and saying, how do these two charts relate to each other, such as describing the chemistry in the room? So you got two charts with great chemistry. That chemistry will be felt by those individuals when they are together, whether it's a romantic connection or otherwise. Chemistry is just energetic rubbings up between two charts that feel pleasurable and powerful to do so. But if two people have great chemistry, but the vertexes in each of the charts don't relate well to the other chart, that's not going to be a relationship because it's not fated. So if someone says to me, hey, I just met this person, can you tell me about the relationship possibilities? I will talk about the chemistry connected between the two charts. But if the vertex from one chart is bad towards the other or vice versa, or they don't make any connection from one chart to the other, I will say, I don't think this is going to turn into a significant fated relationship because the vertex is not well expressed. I had a relationship experience just about a year ago that ended a friends with benefits relationship that had lasted like 8 years. But my Saturn, which is the point of lessons and constriction and karmic contract, was exactly conjunct my father's Venus. So that means that my relationship with my father and his inability to express love toward me, like I knew my father loved me, but man, oh man, he could not get any of that toward me.
Classic.
Or on. No. Wow. But this man I was involved with for 8 years in this friends with benefits relationship, his vertex was 18 degrees of Aquarius, exactly the same point that my Saturn and my father's Venus was.
Wow.
So at the end of the relationship, part of why it was ending for me was I was processing a level of undeservability for love that was planted by my father wound, that this relationship was perfectly designed to help me do some big, big, big healing. And that happened. And the vertex tells that story very, very acutely. So that's the vertex. It is only really used in transits that hit the vertex, might signal moments of fated relationships coming your way. It absolutely is valuable in synastry astrology, where you compare two charts, and when the vertexes are harmoniously connected somehow, that's a fated relationship. It's outside of talking about relationship consciousness. It doesn't have a whole lot of use, but we do want to work with it when considering, attracting a relationship, or once a relationship is attracted, how dynamically powerful the connection might be.
All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. Today we have a call-in dreamer calling from North Carolina. Hey, Kara, what you dreaming?
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah. So I kept having this reoccurring dream. I was a hairstylist for 19 years, and I left my job during the pandemic. My intuition said it was time for me to go. But since I have this dream that I go into a salon and there's not a place for me, and everybody is just kind of ignoring that I'm there, and I'm trying to accommodate my clients. It seems like this process to get them set up is like hours long, and I feel like I'm disappointing them. And I would love to know your intake on what this means and if it relates to me following my purpose of why I left my career of 19 years.
Well, let me ask you a little bit about that. Like, that's out of the dream. What are you pursuing? We're a couple of years out, so some stuff has happened. What are you working on?
Well, kind of to backtrack, I was taking a course during this time for a hairstylist, and it was about building this vision board. And that was my moment of seeing that one thing on my vision board had anything to do with hair. And so, yeah.
Oh, that's hysterical. I'm sorry. I don't know why I don't know why that struck me as so funny, but it did.
Yes. Well, it was a wake-up moment for me. And so it relates to retreats. And I am a podcaster myself. And so that's also a piece of what I've been following. And so my vision is just finding ways to help people to heal and be the best versions of themselves. And so there's so many pieces to what that means, but that's just kind of where I'm at right now with that.
One of the things that, I mean, it's such a small and simple dream, right? It's not like I'm going to go into my, long, like, I'm going to impress you now with all of my, symbolism interpretation. But I am curious about something that, first of all, being a hair stylist is an act of service. You are serving people, and it is a loving act of service. You're helping people find inner beauty matched in the outer expression. Yay, yay, yay. And if you're a therapist, when you're a hairstylist, you already are serving people you're holding space for them. You know exactly what I mean. So that's a fast transaction, right? Someone comes in, sits down, maybe you got in there for an hour, maybe 2 if it's color, and that's it. You're looking to work with people in a much deeper, more significant way, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's interesting that now the process to get your clients taken care of is hours long. That's just something interesting to me. That if the dream has been recurring since you made this choice and your waking life behavior is behaving in the direction of that choice, I think the recurring nature of the dream is just you helping your psyche or your psyche helping you disconnect from the 19-year-long way of serving and helping you move into this new direction. And so one of the first things that struck me about the images you described was the process is hours long. Also, the process is hours long could also be speaking to that we try to create new businesses and new ways of expressing in the world. We think we're going to get there in a certain amount of time, and it takes longer. I'm fond of telling people that in 2003, when my television show was canceled, I told myself 2 years, I'm going to take this momentum and create a business, and it took 10. So the long hours also might be speaking to that. Did you ever feel lacking of confidence as a hairdresser that you might be disappointing your clients?
No.
Yeah.
But a lot of reoccurring roadblocks that I'm finding is people are saying, and it's coming up that like, I knew my worth as a hairstylist. I'm having a hard time finding my worth in this new venture of mine.
That's right, because somewhere inside of you, there's a definitive feeling that you are disappointing the people you are working with, whereas in your shorter transactional experience as a hairdresser, you had confidence and clarity that you knew what you were doing and all was well. You wouldn't be disappointing your clients. Now, what's really, really, really important about this dream, Kara, isn't that, oh, poor you in your deep psyche, you feel like you're disappointing your clients. Because I don't know that that's the purpose of this dream. The purpose of the dream for me is to give space for the part of you that does fear that you're inadequate to the task, that does imagine that your efficacy might cause you to disappoint people that you're working with. Because if you don't voice those fears somewhere, they run us. The unconscious will take that fearful stuff and shove it into the shadow where we say, I'm confident, I'm ready. Meanwhile, underneath the surface of the unconscious, there's a part of you going, what the fuck's she talking about? We are not ready. I don't feel confident. Fuck. We got to push her into making sure she knows we're not ready. And then we behave from those disowned parts because we've shoved them into the shadow we're not willing to look at. Right? So it's not about pathologizing yourself with like some wild imposter syndrome. It's about in the beauty and sacred relationship with the unconscious that lights up when we are in dreams. Your unconscious is saying, let's spend a little time in the fears of inadequacy and that we don't know what we're doing. The process is taking too long. I'm trying to accommodate my clients, but I'm just disappointing them. So you can wake up the next day feeling the sense of I made the right choice. This is the direction I'm heading in. I'm supported by everything. And if I don't spend a little time looking at where I'm saying no, then how can I resoundingly say yes?
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
So how's that going? Like, are you attracting people? Is it you're playing the game in the way you want to impact their lives? Like, how's it going?
Well, I've been doing this like trying to break through my money block challenge on TikTok, and it's crazy what has come in when I've brought awareness to that and that I'm admitting that I'm having that problem. But I've had no problem attracting free resources, the people I need.
That's great.
So all those things are coming in, but I do know I have some money blocks that I have to kind of work on because I've worked and provided my own finances since I was 14. And this is the first time in many years that I have to kind of rely on someone else.
Yes.
And
How
so that's
long
a whole
did it
other
take
ball.
you to go from 0 to 60 20 years ago or 20-something years ago when you started out working as a hairstylist?
Just a couple years. I had a situation where that, someone people left and like it fell into my lap. And so I keep thinking I have to work really hard to get there. And I feel like universe is saying like, we're trying to get you away from that. And so I have to, my productivity doesn't define my worth.
I think the recurrence of the dream is what gives me confidence about your journey, right? I'm more engaged in what's possible for you because of the dream than I would be if you were litanying off all of the ways in which it's working, right? Because if you're not taking a look at where we're saying no in the psyche, then we can't expand. And so I think that's the purpose of the dream. And I'm wishing you all success, honey, because the world may not need another hairdresser, but we certainly need more people helping others with their, healing journey. So, yay.
Awesome.
Thank you, Carol.
So much. I appreciate that.
Yay.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.